I never imagined that my 31st birthday would begin like this, sitting at Romano's, the restaurant where I'd poured sweat and endless shifts for 3 years, surrounded not by friends who truly loved me, but by a family that never stopped reminding me I wasn't enough. I can still see the way the golden evening light filtered through the checkered curtains, painting everything in shades of warmth that my heart could not feel. For days I had built up hope, fragile, tentative hope, that maybe, just maybe Margaret, my mother-in-law, had finally softened toward me. Her sudden sweetness, her careful inquiries about my schedule, her suggestion to celebrate at the very place I worked. I wanted to believe it was acceptance. After years of biting back tears at family dinners, after being reduced to David's wife instead of Jennifer, after enduring sly comments about my job, I wanted to believe she was finally willing to see me. That morning, as I buttoned my navy dress and brushed my hair into waves, I told myself over and over that things were changing. The mirror reflected a woman trying so desperately to be worthy of belonging. Every wrinkle smoothed, every detail checked twice. If Margaret had noticed how hard I'd been studying, if she'd seen how much I adored David, surely she would allow me a place at her table. The dress was not just fabric, it was a shield I stitched together out of faith, out of a yearning to be seen. But deep down, there was a shadow under the surface of my optimism. The memory of catching Margaret days earlier in the kitchen still haunted me, her reading glasses sliding down her nose, the way her red pen moved like a surgeon's knife across legal documents she quickly gathered when I entered. And then that envelope, pink, decorated with silver butterflies, so festive it felt almost mocking in hindsight. Just some family paperwork, she'd said with a smile that was too sharp to be motherly. I tried to shake the unease to pretend her sudden endearments meant reconciliation. How naive I was. David had only fueled my hope. He exchanged mysterious looks with his mother, smiled at texts he wouldn't let me see, and whispered into my hair the night before, "Tomorrow will be a day you'll never forget." I thought he meant love, tenderness, a breakthrough. Instead, what he meant was betrayal so profound that the air around me would feel poisoned when the truth came out. Even now, when I replay that evening, I can feel the weight of eyes on me the moment we stepped into Romano's. Mr. Romano smiled warmly. Maria winked from the kitchen window. Tony shouted a cheerful, "Happy birthday." All of them my true family, unaware of what waited inside the glittering envelope in Margaret's purse. She carried it like a queen carries her crown, with the poise of someone certain she was about to win. And David, my husband, the man who once kissed away my insecurities, held his phone steady, eager to capture what he thought would be my collapse. His sister Emma, smirking, had her own phone raised. It was all rehearsed, all orchestrated, as if my heartbreak were a performance for their amusement. The irony is unbearable when I think of it now, because tucked in my own purse was another envelope, an offer letter from Grand Plaza Hotel, the first real door to a future that opened for me after months of rejection. $45,000 salary, full benefits, employee housing, a chance to rise, to be respected, to breathe. I'd kept it secret, saving it for this very dinner, believing I would unveil it as a gift of my own proof that I wasn't the disappointment Margaret insisted I was. The timing felt fated, cosmic, even her envelope of cruelty against mine of liberation. But I didn't know the scale of her malice until that cake was set before me, candles glowing like fragile stars in the dim light. The chorus of happy birthday faded, and Margaret with a flourish pulled out her envelope. "We have a special gift for you," she said, her voice dripping with false affection. Every head in the restaurant turned, thinking what a lucky woman I must be to have such a devoted family. Emma steadied her phone. David leaned forward, hungry for the shot of me breaking down. My hands trembled as I slid a finger under the flap, tearing the paper with quiet reverence that died the moment my eyes fell on the words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." The letters screamed at me, bold and unflinching. Divorce papers, on my birthday, in front of my coworkers, in front of customers who had become friends, in front of an entire room now holding its breath. The silence at our booth was suffocating, broken only by the faint scrape of Margaret's manicured nails against the table as she smiled triumphant. I should have felt destroyed. That was the script she had written for me, the humiliated wife begging for another chance, sobbing for forgiveness. But instead, something unexpected bloomed in me: clarity. A crystalline sharpness that cut through the fog of 2 years spent trying to win her approval. In that instant, I saw her not as my husband's mother, not as a matriarch to be respected, but as a woman consumed by cruelty, drunk on her own power. I picked up the pen they'd provided. My hand was steady, calmer than it had been in months, and with one stroke of ink I signed my name across the line that set me free. Gasps rippled through the air. David's phone wavered. Emma lowered hers, slightly uncertain whether to keep recording. Margaret's smile faltered as the performance veered off script. "Thank you," I said, my voice loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. "This is actually the most generous gift you could have given me." And then, with deliberate grace, I reached into my purse and withdrew my own envelope. My revenge. My salvation. My proof that I was never the failure they painted me to be. I unfolded the letter slowly, savoring the shift in the atmosphere as I spoke. I have some news to share as well. 3 days ago, I was offered a position as guest services coordinator at Grand Plaza Hotel. The salary is $45,000 a year with full benefits and housing included. The restaurant erupted. Applause from my coworkers, cheers from regular customers, Maria's proud voice rising from the kitchen. "You deserve this." Mr. Romano himself declared me one of his finest employees, looking Margaret straight in the eye as he said it. The people who truly knew me, who had seen my sweat, my patience, my quiet resilience, they celebrated me without hesitation. Margaret's face drained of color. Emma's phone trembled in her hand, still recording but now capturing their failure, their cruelty exposed under the harsh light of truth. David stared at me as if I had become a stranger, unable to reconcile the woman he'd tried to break with the woman standing tall before him. That night they thought they had orchestrated my downfall. Instead, they handed me freedom wrapped in silver butterflies and pink paper. Their cruelty became my liberation. Their betrayal became my proof. And as I walked out of Romano's into the cool evening air, I felt something I hadn't in years: pride. The air outside Romano's that night felt different, sharp, clean, almost electric. Each step I took away from that corner booth was a step away from years of humiliation, from suffocating dinners where my worth was measured against degrees. I didn't have careers I couldn't boast of, and expectations I never agreed to live under. I clutched my purse tightly, my job offer letter folded inside like a secret weapon that had just saved my life. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages I didn't read. I knew without looking that it was David, Margaret, and Emma scrambling to regain control of the story they had tried to script. But the narrative no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me. I drove home in silence, the road lit only by headlights and the soft glow of the dashboard. My hands were steady on the wheel, though. Inside my chest felt like it had been cracked open and stitched back together in the span of a single night. Betrayal and liberation are strange twins. They arrive together, indistinguishable at first, leaving you dizzy with their combined weight. I whispered to myself in the darkness, "You're free now." The words felt foreign on my tongue, but real, true, a mantra to carry me through the chaos that was about to follow. The next 2 weeks blurred into a storm of preparations and avoidance. David tried to corner me into conversations I refused to have. His texts, his voicemails, his late-night knocks on the bedroom door when I locked it, each attempt grew more desperate. "Can we talk?" he begged, once his voice cracking. But I was done talking. For 2 years I had spoken softly, carefully, hoping to earn their approval. I had explained myself until my own reflection stopped believing me. Now I had nothing left to explain. Margaret, on the other hand, launched her campaign immediately. She called my phone with a syrupy tone that barely disguised her panic. "Jennifer, dear, we should discuss this. Divorce doesn't have to be final so quickly. Think of David. Think of the family." Each word dripped with false concern, but I could hear the fear underneath. She was terrified not of losing me, but of losing control. For years, she had defined me as inadequate, and now I had rewritten myself in a single evening. Emma stayed mostly silent, though I saw her shadow online. A cryptic post on social media. Some people mistake desperation for independence. A jab aimed at me, no doubt, but it barely grazed me. I was no longer interested in her coded insults or the validation of strangers who believed her version of events. The morning I packed my things, I did it quietly, methodically. My belongings didn't fill much clothes books, a few sentimental items, my notebooks filled with rejection letters and cover drafts. As I folded each shirt, I thought about the hours I had spent ironing wrinkles before family gatherings, desperate to appear polished, acceptable. Now I packed them not to please Margaret, but to dress myself in a new city where no one knew my failures. David stood in the doorway watching me. His face was pale drawn as though he hadn't slept. "So that's it?" he asked finally. His voice wasn't angry. It was hollow, almost childlike. "You're really leaving?" I paused, my hand resting on the zipper of my suitcase. "I'm not leaving, David. I've already left. The moment your mother handed me those papers and you chose to record it, I walked out then." My voice shook not from uncertainty, but from the exhaustion of carrying this truth alone for too long. He opened his mouth, but no defense came. He had no words to undo the video of my humiliation, no argument to erase the image of him grinning behind his phone while his mother ripped my life apart. Silence was his only response, and silence was all I needed. 2 weeks later, I stood in the marble lobby of Grand Plaza Hotel wearing my crisp new uniform. The name tag on my chest gleamed: Jennifer Walsh, Guest Services Coordinator. My maiden name. My name. Seeing it again etched in silver against the black enamel filled me with pride so sharp it brought tears to my eyes. The lobby was alive with polished energy guests, dragging designer luggage staff gliding across the floor with practiced ease, the faint scent of lilies rising from vases taller than my shoulders. My footsteps echoed on the marble as I walked to the front desk for my first shift. Every detail felt surreal, as though I had stepped into the life Margaret swore I could never have. Jessica Martinez, my manager, greeted me with a smile that radiated genuine warmth. "Jennifer, welcome. We're so glad you're here." Her tone was steady, confident, filled with belief. I hadn't realized how much I needed that until it washed over me. For 2 years I had been spoken to as if I were a child fumbling through adulthood. Jessica spoke to me like a colleague, an equal. She assigned me my first duties, checking in VIP guests, coordinating room requests, ensuring seamless experiences. The words might have intimidated another newcomer, but to me they felt natural. After years of juggling 6 tables at once, remembering orders down to the sauce, calming angry customers with a smile, this was not new. It was simply dressed in finer clothes. My hands moved with practiced efficiency, my voice steady, my smile genuine. Guests responded with gratitude instead of pity. And for the first time in years, I felt respected. The apartment they provided was small but beautiful, perched just 5 minutes from the hotel. Large windows spilled light across pale wood floors. A balcony overlooked the city skyline, and I'd sit there at dawn with a steaming cup of coffee, marveling at the silence. No Margaret's sharp voice echoing down hallways, no whispered judgments behind doors. Just me, the city, and the sunrise. Nights were the hardest. That was when memories crept back, the sound of Margaret introducing me as David's wife, who works in the service industry, the way David avoided eye contact when people asked about my job, the sting of Emma's smirk when I fumbled through small talk at family gatherings. Those wounds didn't vanish with a new job. They lingered like bruises beneath the skin, tender to the touch. I'd lie awake in my new bed, the hum of the city outside my window, and ask myself, how did I let them convince me I was less? The answer was painful but clear. Because I wanted to belong. Because I thought love meant shrinking myself until I fit the shape someone else carved for me. Because I believed family was supposed to be unconditional. I had mistaken their cruelty for standards, their disapproval for guidance, their silence for truth. But here in this new city, Each day proved that Margaret's narrative was a lie. Guests thanked me for my kindness. Jessica praised my leadership potential. Coworkers invited me out after shifts not to interrogate me about degrees or career plans, but to laugh, to share stories, to treat me as an equal. Slowly, brick by brick, I rebuilt the foundation Margaret had tried to demolish. And yet some nights I still thought about David, not with longing but with a quiet ache. He had been the man who once told me he loved how strong I was, how independent. The man who once held me through my fears and promised me forever. How did he become the man who recorded my humiliation instead of shielding me from it? Was it weakness? Was it loyalty to his mother? Or had he always been this way, and I simply chose not to see it? The questions haunted me, but I refused to let them anchor me. His betrayal was part of my past. My future was mine alone. I remember one evening during my second week when a difficult guest stormed to the desk, furious about a mix-up with his suite. His voice was loud enough to draw stares, his words sharp enough to sting. My hands shook for a moment, a flashback to Margaret's public scoldings at holiday dinners. But then instinct took over. I listened. I nodded. I apologized with sincerity, offered solutions swiftly, and within minutes the storm subsided. The man's tone softened, his posture relaxed, and as he walked away he thanked me with genuine respect. Jessica watched from across the lobby. Later she pulled me aside. That, she said firmly, is why we hired you. You don't just manage problems, you transform them. That's leadership. Her words lingered with me long after. For years I had been told I wasn't enough, that I lacked education, polish, experience. But in that moment, someone in a position of authority didn't just see me as enough, she saw me as more, as potential, as someone worthy of trust. I walked home that night with tears streaming silently down my cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but of recognition. Finally, I was somewhere I belonged. Life at Grand Plaza unfolded like a dream I had once been too afraid to imagine. Each morning, I put on my uniform, smoothing the fabric as though I were donning armor. The marble floors reflected my polished shoes, the chandeliers sparkled above like constellations, and every good evening welcome to the Grand Plaza carried me further from the woman Margaret had tried to erase. But liberation does not erase wounds, it only gives them room to breathe. And in the quiet hours between shifts, I often found myself tracing the scars Margaret and David had left on my heart. Sometimes it was the memory of her voice, sharp, dismissive, introducing me as the one who works in the service industry. Other times it was the look on David's face as he filmed me opening divorce papers, anticipation glimmering in his eyes as though my pain were a gift he had been waiting to unwrap. These memories came uninvited, slipping into my dreams, curling around my chest until I woke gasping. Jessica noticed the shadows behind my smile. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of coordinating VIP check-ins, she lingered by my desk. "You're doing wonderfully, Jennifer," she said. Her tone softened. "But I can see something weighs on you." I wanted to tell her everything, that my husband had offered me up for humiliation, that my mother-in-law had weaponized my birthday, that for years I had lived as a ghost in their world. But I swallowed the words. Some truths are too raw to speak aloud until you are ready. Instead, I smiled faintly and said, "I'm still learning how to believe I deserve to be here." Her eyes met mine with understanding. "You do. Never doubt that." And she walked away, leaving me with the first spark of belief that maybe one day I would fully accept her words. The weeks stretched into months. Slowly, the weight of Margaret's voice grew quieter. Guests sought me out by name, requesting me at the desk because they trusted my calm presence. Colleagues invited me to after-shift dinners where laughter spilled louder than wine. The city's skyline became my confidant, glittering at night as I leaned on my balcony railing, whispering my gratitude into the open air. But no journey forward is without ghosts. One evening, as autumn painted the streets with gold, I left the hotel and spotted a figure leaning against the far wall of the lobby. For a heartbeat, I thought my mind was playing cruel tricks, but then he turned and I saw him, David. He looked smaller somehow. His suit wrinkled, his tie loosened, his face marked by sleepless nights. For a second, my knees buckled. Here was the man who once whispered forever into my hair, the same man who sat silent as his mother delivered my destruction. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. "Jennifer," he said softly. My name trembled on his lips. "Please, can we talk?" I froze. The marble floor felt cold beneath my shoes, the air heavy with unsaid words. Guests walked past us, oblivious to the storm gathering in that quiet corner. I should have turned away, walked past him without a word. But the part of me that had once loved him, the part that still ached from unanswered questions, held me in place. "What could you possibly have to say?" My voice was sharper than I intended, but it steadied me. He shifted, shame flickering across his features. "I made a mistake. That night, it wasn't supposed to be like that. Mom pushed for it, Emma encouraged it. I thought—" His words trailed off, strangled by regret. "You thought what I demanded." My hands trembled, but not from weakness, from fury. That it would be funny, that recording my humiliation would be some kind of family keepsake. He winced. "I was wrong. I see that now. Stop." I cut him off. "You don't get to rewrite it. You don't get to pretend you were powerless when you held the camera." My chest heaved with each word, years of suppressed anger rushing to the surface. "Do you know what you did to me? Do you understand how it feels to be betrayed not just by your husband, but by the person you thought would protect you from the world?" His eyes glistened. "I lost you, and it's killing me." For a flicker of a moment, the ache of old love twisted inside me. But then I remembered the applause of Romano's customers, the warmth of Maria's voice, the pride in Jessica's eyes. And I realized something vital. Losing me wasn't killing him, it was killing his pride. "You didn't lose me, David," I whispered, leaning closer so he could hear the truth sharp as glass. "You threw me away, on my birthday, in front of strangers, and you expected me to beg to be picked up again." Silence stretched between us. His shoulders slumped, and in that instant I saw not the man I had married, but the boy who had never learned to stand apart from his mother's shadow. My pity evaporated as quickly as it came. "I have nothing left to say to you," I told him firmly, stepping back. "Go back to Margaret. She taught you everything you know about cruelty. You deserve each other." His face crumpled, but I didn't wait to see if he spoke again. I walked past him, my heels clicking against marble, each step a punctuation mark on the end of our story. That night, I sat on my balcony under the city lights, my hands still trembling. For hours, I replayed his face, his words, the hollow apology. But beneath it all was a strange calm. I had faced him, looked him in the eye, and spoken the truth I had once been too afraid to voice. It didn't erase the pain, but it reminded me of something crucial. I was no longer trapped. Days later, Margaret appeared. She waited outside the hotel, her designer coat wrapped tightly around her eyes, darting nervously as if the world might judge her too. When she saw me approach, she straightened her lips, curling into a brittle smile. "Jennifer, dear," she began. The false sweetness grated against my ears. "We need to talk." I laughed. I couldn't help it. A sharp, bitter laugh that startled her. "Talk after everything. After you handed me divorce papers like a party favor." Her smile faltered, but she pressed on. "You've proven your point. You have your job, your independence. But marriage is about forgiveness, about family. David still loves you." I stepped closer, my voice low, but fierce. "Marriage is about protection, about loyalty, and you made sure he failed me in both. You don't get to lecture me about family when you turned mine into a circus." Her eyes narrowed, the mask slipping. "You think you've won, but you'll regret this. Independence is lonely, Jennifer. One day you'll realize our family was all you had." I smiled, a real one this time. "I already have a family. Jessica, Maria, Tony. Every guest who thanks me sincerely. They see me, they respect me. That's more than you ever gave me." Her face hardened, but I didn't wait for her reply. I walked past her, straight into the revolving doors of Grand Plaza, feeling them spin like the wheel of fate itself. Margaret's voice echoed behind me, sharp and desperate, but the glass swallowed her words. That night, as I locked my apartment door, I leaned against it and closed my eyes. For years, I had begged for scraps of their approval. Now I understood the truth. I didn't need them. I never had. What I needed was the courage to choose myself. And I had. The weeks after Margaret's appearance outside the hotel carried with them a strange mix of serenity and unease. On one hand, my life had never felt fuller. Each shift at Grand Plaza challenged me in ways that stretched my confidence rather than shrank it. I coordinated entire events, corporate conferences, wedding receptions, managing dozens of moving parts with the same calm efficiency I once used to balance tables at Romano's. Guests praised me in handwritten notes. Management complimented my ability to diffuse tension before it escalated. For the first time, my work was not just tolerated, it was celebrated. And yet, beneath that success, pulsed the memory of Margaret's warning: "Independence is lonely, Jennifer." Her words lingered like smoke after a fire, creeping into the quiet moments when I set my dinner for one on the kitchen counter, or when the city lights sparkled outside my balcony, but no one sat beside me to see them. I hated that she still had that power to make me question, to second guess. But I reminded myself loneliness is better than being surrounded by people who delight in your pain. Jessica became my anchor. She saw my effort and, more importantly, my heart. One evening after a long day, she pulled me aside with a gleam in her eyes. "Jennifer, there's a management track opening. I want you to consider applying." For a moment, my breath caught. Me. The same woman who had been told I was nothing but David's burden, who was mocked for lacking a degree, who was given a book titled Professional Success for Women, wrapped in newspaper as if my aspirations were a joke. My instinct was to shrink, to say I wasn't ready. But Jessica's steady gaze told me she believed it. And if she believed it, maybe I could too. I began studying again, but this time with purpose, not to prove Margaret wrong, not to erase David's shame, but to build myself. Late nights, I pored over leadership manuals, practiced presentation skills, and shadowed senior managers, soaking in every detail. The girl who once cried over rejection emails was now standing in a five-star lobby preparing to lead. But of course, the past never lets go without a fight. It started small whispers from coworkers that someone had been calling the hotel asking personal questions about me. Then one morning, Jessica approached with furrowed brows. "Jennifer, I need to ask, has someone been spreading negative stories about you?" My stomach sank. "Margaret, who else?" Jessica explained carefully. "We've had calls claiming you're unstable, that you left your marriage under questionable circumstances. Someone even implied you fabricated your qualifications." Her voice softened. "I don't believe a word of it. But I want you to be aware." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Of course she wasn't finished. Margaret's power had always lived in whispers and shaping the narrative before I could speak for myself. Now she was trying to drag her poison into my new life. That evening I sat on my balcony with the printed job offer letter spread before me, just as I had that night at Romano's. I traced the ink with trembling fingers, reminding myself, this is mine. Earned. Real. Margaret could not take it away unless I let her. Still, the idea of her voice slithering through the phone lines into my workplace made me sick. For years she had twisted my identity into something shameful. And now she wanted to brand me with her lies in the very place I had built my refuge. The next day I made a choice. No more silence. No more letting her define me in absentia. I asked Jessica for a private meeting. Sitting in her office, I laid it all out: the divorce papers at Romano's, the years of subtle cruelty, the ambush recorded on phones. My voice cracked at times, shame rising like bile, but I forced the words out. When I finished, Jessica leaned forward, eyes fierce. "Jennifer, listen to me. Whatever she says, it has no power here. We see you. We see your work, your character, and no one's whispers can erase that." Tears slid down my cheeks, but this time they weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of release. For the first time I had spoken the truth out loud, and not been met with pity or judgment, but with respect. Still, Margaret wasn't done. Weeks later, she appeared again, this time in the very lobby of Grand Plaza. I was at the desk greeting a line of guests when I saw her reflection in the polished marble floor before I saw her face. She walked in with Emma at her side, both dressed in elegant coats, their expressions brittle with determination. "Jennifer," Margaret said smoothly, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "we'd like a word." Heat flared up my neck, but I stood tall. I'm working, I replied evenly. Emma's smirk returned the one I knew so well from countless dinners. Don't worry, we won't take long. We just want to clear the air. I gestured toward the line of waiting guests. If you need a room, the reservation desk is right there. Otherwise, I suggest you leave. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You think you're safe here, but this job won't fill the hole you've created. Family is forever, Jennifer. You can't erase us. A hush rippled through the lobby. Guests slowed their steps, curious. My coworkers stiffened, ready to intervene. For a second, the old Jennifer, the one who shrank under Margaret's disapproval, rose inside me. But then I remembered Romano's, the applause, the freedom of signing those papers. So I lifted my chin and spoke clearly, my voice carrying across marble and glass. You're right, Margaret, family is forever. But sometimes forever is poison, and I refuse to drink it anymore. Gasps from guests. Emma's smirk vanished. Margaret's face flushed crimson. Jessica appeared at my side, her presence like a wall of strength. Is there a problem here? She asked firmly. Margaret faltered, her words sputtering. We were just leaving. They turned coats swishing like defeated flags and walked out into the street. My knees trembled, but I stayed standing until the doors closed behind them. Only then did I allow myself a breath. That night, alone in my apartment, I replayed the moment over and over. The old me would have wilted, but now I had spoken my truth with the world watching, and Margaret had been the one forced to leave in shame. The next morning, Jessica handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was the official notice I had been accepted into the management training program. I clutched it to my chest, tears burning my eyes. Not because of Margaret, not because of David, but because despite everything they had done, I had risen. Yet even in triumph, I felt the shadow of unfinished business. Margaret's cruelty had defined too much of my life to simply fade away. I knew one day there would be a final confrontation, not in lobbies or whispers, but face to face. And when that day came, I would be ready. The months that followed were the truest test of who I had become. Promotion came with responsibility, late nights reviewing reports, early mornings coordinating with teams, constant demands from executives and guests. Yet every challenge, every pressure felt different from the suffocating weight of Margaret's expectations. This was pressure I chose. This was growth, not destruction. But as I thrived, whispers from my old life circled closer. Friends from my hometown sent messages. David's been asking about you. Margaret's telling people she wants reconciliation. My first instinct was laughter. Reconciliation. With the woman who had wrapped my divorce in butterflies and handed it to me like a poisoned gift. With the husband who recorded my humiliation as if it were entertainment. Still, part of me braced. I knew they would come again. People like Margaret never release their grip without one last attempt to tighten it. And indeed, it wasn't long before the invitation arrived. A letter hand-delivered to my apartment, her script neat and deliberate. Jennifer, we request your presence at David's upcoming birthday celebration. It would mean a great deal to the family. We believe enough time has passed to set aside old misunderstandings. Please come, Margaret. I held the paper in my hands for a long time, the city humming softly outside my window. Every instinct screamed not to go. Yet another part of me, the part that wanted closure, that wanted the final word, considered it. I had spent too many years letting Margaret control the narrative. Perhaps this was my chance to end it on my terms. And so 2 weeks later, I walked into the same kind of upscale restaurant Margaret adored. Polished silver candlelight flickering expensive wine on every table. My heels clicked against the marble floor and heads turned. David looked up first, his face thinner now, softened with something like relief. Emma froze her fork halfway to her mouth, and Margaret's smile stretched wide, but her eyes betrayed the calculation beneath. Jennifer, she said, rising to greet me as though nothing had ever happened. How lovely of you to join us. I didn't hug her. I didn't even extend my hand. I simply nodded and took my seat. Silence fell for a beat too long, until waiters came bustling with menus. Small talk filled the air like static, everyone pretending this was normal. Finally, Margaret leaned in, lowering her voice just enough to feign intimacy. You've done well for yourself. We've all heard about the Grand Plaza. Quite an achievement. I studied her carefully. Was that praise? No, it was possession. She wanted to claim credit to weave my success into her narrative as proof of her guidance. I would not allow it. Yes, I said evenly, I've done very well, because I stopped listening to people who told me I wasn't enough. Her smile tightened, but she didn't retreat. Family pushes us to improve. Perhaps we were harsh, but it was only to bring out your potential. I laughed, sharp cutting. No, Margaret. You didn't push me to improve. You tried to bury me. You handed me divorce papers in front of strangers and smiled while my husband filmed it. That wasn't tough love. That was cruelty. David flinched, shame flickering across his face. Emma shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting to her phone. But Margaret held my gaze, her mask faltering only slightly. You're mistaken, she said quietly. No, I replied, my voice steady enough to draw the attention of nearby tables. I'm not mistaken. I remember every word, every look, every time you introduced me as if I were less than. And I also remember the applause at Romano's when I announced my new job. I remember strangers cheering for me while my own family sat in silence. That's the truth. That's who you are. The table was silent. Even the clinking of silverware from surrounding diners seemed to fade. David finally spoke, his voice rough. Jennifer, is there no chance? I cut him off. No. The marriage ended the moment you chose your mother's approval over my dignity, and nothing you say will ever undo that. Emma muttered something under her breath, but I didn't care enough to ask what. My eyes were locked on Margaret's, watching her carefully built facade crack. For once, she wasn't in control. For once, her weapon of shame had no edge. I stood, placing my napkin neatly on the table. I didn't come here for reconciliation. I came here for closure. And I have it. You wanted to see if I would still bend. I won't. Not ever again. Without waiting for a reply, I walked out. My heels echoed down the marble hall, each step lighter than the last. Outside, the cool night air wrapped around me, not as a threat, but as an embrace. In the weeks that followed, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time, I no longer thought about Margaret daily. Her voice no longer haunted my mirror. David's absence no longer felt like a wound, but like healed skin, tender, yes, but stronger. My focus returned fully to the life I was building. The management training program pushed me harder than anything before. I delivered presentations to executives, coordinated high-profile events, and mentored new hires. Each success was mine, carved from resilience. One evening, after a flawless conference for international guests, Jessica pulled me aside again. Jennifer, you've exceeded every expectation. I want you to prepare for an assistant manager role. Tears stung my eyes as I nodded, overwhelmed. Assistant manager. The girl who had once cried over a pile of rejection letters was now being invited to lead. That night, sitting on my balcony with the city sprawling below, I let the memories wash over me one last time. The pink envelope, the smirks, the betrayal. And then I released them into the air, whispering, "Thank you." Not because I forgave them, but because their cruelty had carved the path that led me here. Their attempt to bury me had become the soil where I grew stronger. I thought of the women who might be watching, listening to my story on nights when their own reflections looked broken. To them I say, do not measure yourself by the standards of those who delight in your pain. Do not beg for love that comes with conditions. Family can wound deeper than any stranger, but it does not define your worth. Sometimes the greatest gift betrayal can give you is freedom. So if my story has touched you, if you've ever walked through your own storm of cruelty and come out standing taller, I ask you to share this moment with me. Like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe so we can keep telling the stories of women who refuse to stay down. Together, we remind each other, dignity is never given, it is claimed. Thank you for listening to mine.